Hi there, welcome to this short series where I'm restoring a lovely old 1939 Brown Junior spark ignition engine. It's a 10cc engine, so it's a good size. Now this is the fourth video in this series, and the very first video was kind of kicked off because I couldn't get this engine to run and there was clearly something wrong with it, despite it having good compression and still turning over. So in the first video I dismantled it, which was a bit of a tricky process, and kind of assessed what was wrong with it, which essentially the gudgeon pin or wrist pin was broken and the conrod was bent. Now in the second video I've made a new conrod, and in the third video, if I can find it, here we go, I made a new gudgeon pin. And now in this video we're all ready to pull this engine back together and get it set up. There's a couple of crucial things when setting up spark ignition engines that it would be worth looking at as part of this video. And actually one of the things about setting the fuel mixture applies to any kind of engine really, but specifically with this spark ignition, with any spark ignition engine. So what I'm going to do is we'll have a quick look at the components, and then I need to start getting them cleaned up. And essentially these components have been all around my bench here. I've been milling, I've been using emery paper or wet and dry paper to clean up the conrod, and there's going to be abrasive all over the place really, or there could be. I have tried to be careful with the cylinder and the piston. I've got the piston in a bag here, but essentially before we pull them back together we need to make sure that there's no abrasives that are going to get introduced into the engine, which is just going to cause a problem later down the line. So anyway, we'll take a quick look at this and then I'll get them cleaned up. Right, well, we've got all of the bits for the engine here. We've got the cylinder, and I've cleaned up the fins just a little bit on that. Some of them were just a little bit bent, but very carefully. We've got the crankcase, piston, crankshaft, and over here, which I think is out of camera, just move this across, we've got the new conrod, which I've already had in this 100% methanol and given a scrub with a toothbrush, hence the glove. So essentially the bits that I want to clean up, just to make sure they're nice and clean, I put them in there for a little bit, give them a little bit of a soak, and then pick them up and just give them a clean with the toothbrush like this. And we'll just make sure there's nothing abrasive or anything on them, and then they'll be ready to put together. Once these have dried off, I'll give them a little bit of an oil. I mean, even the new gudgeon pin I'm going to clean up because I've had wet and dry or emery paper on that, so we just want to make sure that it hasn't got any abrasives on it at all. So this is 100% methanol, I think I've said that. So I'll get these cleaned up and then we'll have a look at the process of putting this back together. Actually, one thing I must say is never ever put your old original plastic tanks like this in methanol. These do not respond well to alcohol, and if you dunk it in and give it a scrub, it might be okay. I don't know how quick it affects it, but it does affect it, and it will just send it to a mush. It's not good with alcohol. So just thought I'd better give that warning, as I hadn't done. So I'll get these bits cleaned up. Now, something that's worth pointing out on these Brown Juniors, and you see this with a lot of engines. I had it with an ED Comp Special recently. There's a tiny little hole there which is kind of easy to overlook, but that runs down this centre web here and comes out on the main bearing. We've got what looks like a bronze main bearing there, and that is really important for oiling the crankshaft, and it's worth just putting a pin down that and making sure that it's nice and clear like that. You can see the pin coming down. So I mean, this one wasn't blocked up, but on the ED Comp Special I had recently, it was absolutely chock-a-blocked and quite difficult to clean out. Just worth mentioning that. Right, as with most two-stroke engines, they are very simple. There's very few components, and these are all clean and dry now, and what we need to do is just make sure everything is well oiled, because the methanol that I put on here will certainly take off any oil, and we don't want to be putting them together without any kind of lubricant. So if we put in the crankshaft first, and that runs really nice, lovely and smooth, and we'll put on a little bit of oil on the crank pin, and we'll put a little bit of oil in the big end as well. There we go, and there. Wow, lovely and smooth that is. And right, so now before we can get the cylinder on, which we're going to talk about in a second because there's a slight issue with that, we need to get the piston on, and the piston needs to go the right way round. Now, I didn't mark it. Now we've got two holes here, and these holes line up with two holes which you can just about see there, hopefully, at the bottom of the cylinder, on the bottom side here where my fingers are, and that is for this transfer port here. So the piston needs to go that way round, so that those holes, two holes in the front of the cylinder there, line up with these two in the piston skirt. So essentially those need to go forward. So what we'll do, that is forward of the engine, so we're going to put on the piston now, and we're going to line those holes up forward, and we'll put some oil around on the pins, piston rings as well, and we'll put a little bit in the wrist pin, gudgeon pin, and there we go. Now we need to put the piston on with this at this stage. We can't put it on the conrod first and then fit the conrod. It doesn't work because the piston gets in the way. So if we get that in, there we go. Lovely smooth fit with no play. That is really nice. Right, I now have a little bit of a dilemma. When I took this apart, there was a very, very fine gasket. I think there was anyway. It was so fine it just disintegrated. I'm not happy putting this together without a gasket. I did make one out of the thinnest gasket paper I have, and this gasket paper is 0.21. That was too thick to allow this to screw up enough that the Venturi came round and was in the right position on the back of the engine sticking out. So I need a thinner gasket, and I haven't got any thinner gasket paper, and I couldn't find any for sale. So what I've done is I've taken some of that thicker gasket paper, and you can see here it's 0.22, but what I've done is I've sanded it with some wet and dry, and I've taken it right down to a really thin gasket paper. It's still quite strong, so I'm hoping that this will work. I'm going to use my hole gauge. I can determine the maximum size for the gasket and the minimum size. So I'm going to draw that out on this gasket paper. We'll cut it out, and then we'll have a look and see if it'll fit properly. There we go. Right, not the best gasket I've ever cut, but let me just take a little bit off this side. There we go. And now we need to be very careful to get this on. There. that looks good. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to get this clamped in a jig so I can screw it up without worrying about damaging the venturi or bending the crankshaft. Right, so I'm going to put this together now, and I thought it was worth just saying a word on how to get the piston in because of the rings. So I'm putting in some oil, get that nicely lubricated so it'll slip in easy. Now there's lots of different ways and everybody will have their own way of doing this, but if we position because it's got two rings, we'll position the gap in the ring at opposite sides of the piston to each other. Now what we need to do is we need to just push the ring up and then pinch it with our nails so it goes in like that, and then hopefully we can just slide the piston over it like that, and then we can go round to this side, and again we push the ring up, gets slightly harder with the second ring and we have to make sure it doesn't pop out, so we push it up, we pinch it in and we slide it on. There we go. That looked easy, but sometimes it's not quite as easy. Now I'm going to put a bit more oil on this because just to make sure that it goes together nicely. Now there we go. Now I'm going to put a bit of oil on, well no actually before I do this I'll clamp it in my clamp and get it all ready, and then I'll put some oil around there. I don't want to put oil on now because I don't want to swell the gasket. I don't know whether it will swell, but if that's a possibility I'd rather it didn't. Right, well if you saw the dismantling video you'll have seen the setup I've got here. I've essentially got the crankcase clamped in a test stand on a bit of wood, so it allows me to get a lot of purchase on that. I'm not trying to hold the crankcase and inadvertently using the crankshaft which could bend it. Also I've got a hole in a piece of wood with a slot in the vise, put the cylinder fins in that, and then that will just clamp up like that and hold it. The alternative is I try and hold it with my hand, put pressure on the venturi and snap it off, which obviously isn't the thing we want to do. So now I'm going to put some oil on this and hopefully screw it up. Right, well I'll be honest with you, that wasn't a pleasant process. I have got it done. It was really tight, as tight as it was coming out, but it went on fairly smoothly. I didn't have to put excessive force, I don't think, and that is lined up. So I had to put on another clamp which I used when I dismantled it, and that's this with the two bolts that go into the head, and that's why the head is designed like that. And I'll point out that these marks in the head were like that when I got the engine, so somebody else had had a go at taking it apart. I did think about trying to clean those up, but I thought I'm going to thin it down too much because they are quite deep. But anyway, thank goodness for that. Right, I've now fitted the spray bar, and the spray bar had a single hole for the fuel to come out into the venturi. If it's got a single hole, it needs to be facing that way, the hole. Now I'm going to screw this needle valve right down until this is closed. Now I tell you what, let me I'll screw it down now. That won't go down any further, that's totally shut. And if we put on a piece of fuel tubing and we blow, yeah, we can confirm that is absolutely closed shut. Now if we go out and buy a brand new engine like a PAW, then they'll say open it 2.5 turns or 2 turns, something like that, and you're in the right ballpark for starting the engine. Well, these old engines don't play by those rules. Let's open it 2.5 turns. 1, 2.5. Now blowing down this, it is still absolutely shut tight. So another half turn, 3 turns. No, I still can't hear any air coming through, so it's still shut tight. So 3.5 turns, yeah, I can just hear the air coming through that now, so it's just opened in that last half turn. So let's open it another half turn, so that's open 4 turns now, and that is sounding about right. So I'm going to open it just a little bit more, and now we know that when we try and start this, we're at least getting some fuel through. If we'd gone by how some of our other engines and the instructions say and opened it 2.5 turns, we could flick till our heart's content and nothing would ever happen. So that's the one thing worth talking about. Now we're going to build up the ignition points timing, and what we're going to do is we're going to put a bit of oil on this boss here, a little bit of oil on this. Now this is essentially where the contacts are. You can just see the contacts in there, and they are opened and closed by the back of the prop washer having a cam on it that presses on that and closes it. So that needs to go on that way with that spring sticking outwards. Now if I put that on, I know that the space for the points, the gap is not going to be right, because this goes all the way back and we end up with the points not working right. So I'm going to put on a couple of shims. This is something I found out when I was trying to get this engine to run before, and that just pushes this arm slightly forward and just alters the contacts a little bit. Now where I've seen in old manuals where they suggest bending this aluminium arm to adjust that rather than putting the shims on the back. So you could just take the shims off, you could just bend that forward. But there's absolutely no way I'm going to bend an 85-year-old cast aluminium timer arm like this, because I think it'll break. So now what we need to do is we need to determine where top dead center is, which if I turn that, I can see in there where the piston is coming up right up top. So that is top dead center. We've got the cam on there, and what we're going to do is we're going to put that on there, and then there we go, there. Now with that on there, we can check to see if that is in the right place. Actually, I've just realized I've got a little washer here I'm supposed to put on, so let's put that on, little thrust washer, and now we can put the cam on. Now I'm not sure whether that cam goes like that or like that. I think it goes like that, but what we're going to do is we're going to test this, and so we're going to push that home like that, and we're going to set up an electrical circuit so we can see when these points are opening and closing. Right, now I've done 2 things. I've set up the prop so that the blue where the tape is at top dead center. I can still see the piston at the top here going up and down, and that is absolutely top dead center. Second thing I've done, as you've probably just seen, I've connected up an LED to the points, so every time the points close, the LED lights up. You can see that there. Now what we need to have with a spark ignition engine is we need to have, as you're coming up to top dead center, we need the points to close, and you can see the lights come on. The current is now going to the coil, charging the coil, and what we need to do is, or what we need is the points to open just before top dead center to allow the coil to discharge and produce a spark to the spark plug. So this light should be going off, if it's set up correctly, just before top dead center. There, just before top dead center. And of course we can alter that so it goes off nearer top dead center or further away from top dead center. I just got, yeah. So we can set it there, or if we move this way, it's going there like that. Now the reason we want it going off before top dead center is because when the point's open, the coil discharges, sends a spark to the spark plug. Once the spark plug sparks, it doesn't produce an immediate expansion of gases. It takes a little bit of time for the gases to ignite and to expand. We're only talking milliseconds here, but it takes a little bit of time. And in that time, as we come up here, the spark plug sparks there where the point's open, and then it's just this very short period that allows the gases to expand until it gets just after top dead center, and all the pressure and the force of the expansion is pushing the piston down. So that's why we set up just before top dead center. So we got the cam in the right place, and we can now tell that not only the points are working, but that we've got it sparking in the right place. I know people who have tried for hours to start engines only to find out that actually it's sparking at bottom dead center or something like that. So that is a good sign. Right, well, finally I've got a spark plug in, plenty of oil in the engine, and it sounds absolutely lovely. I can't see any reason now why this isn't going to run as sweet as a nut. Well, I can honestly tell you, I am so pleased to get this finished, because there are times when it's been just a little bit stressful, mainly taking it apart and putting it back together. I'm not comfortable with putting the amount of force on things that you had to do to get this unscrewed and screwed up. But anyway, one thing I should say is that you'll have noticed I haven't put on the fuel tank, just got the spray bar. Now, I meant to say when I was filming it earlier but forgot. The reason I haven't done that is because I want to run it off a separate tank and eliminate any issues with the pickup of the fuel, so that I know that there isn't a problem with that. Once I've got it running, and also I don't need to keep filling it once I get it started. Once I've got it running, I know it's right, then I will put the tank on, because the tank should be on, and it looks so much better with the tank on. So, but I just thought I'd explain my reasoning for not putting it on at this stage. But I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this project. I mean, this 85-year-old engine deserves to be brought back into running condition. And to be honest, I'd spent quite a long time trying to get this started and couldn't understand why it would only run for a few seconds, because it would still turn over even with the bent conrod and the broken gudgeon pin. It would still turn over, and didn't seem and didn't feel like there was anything wrong, because the gudgeon pin was still holding the top of the conrod. Obviously it wasn't going to run, and it was damaged. So it's so nice to bring this back into life, and they're just absolutely gorgeous, iconic engines of the age. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this and found it useful. I'm going to pull this video to a close now, and as I'm sure you've guessed, the next video we're going to be in the test stand, and hopefully, fingers crossed, this thing is going to purr. Thanks very much for watching.